Hi everyone, welcome to Train Sim World. Here we are. My profile has been added to TAF. There I am, level 2, because I've been doing a few of the little tutorials just to get a hang of this game and to see how she plays. So, Train Sim World finally here. We've been waiting for this for a few weeks now, probably a couple of months since we played the beta. And if you remember the beta, it was very promising, but it was very, very resource demanding. Performance was poor, and we hope for better in the real game. So it's finally been released on the 16th of March 2017. So how is it looking, I hear you ask? Well, this is just the sign-in screen. Obviously I've signed in with my my profile here. I'll just select him and we'll come into the main menu proper. Now if we have a look at me, this is what I've done. So this is me, created yesterday obviously. I'm recording this on the 17th. Best route, sandpatch grade. That's the only route available currently in the game, and we'll talk about that a bit in later. So I'm level 2, and my best train is the SD40. As you can see, you get 3 locomotives with the release of the game, and we might as well go through those because you want to see what you get for your £24. The GP38, interesting little train. This one. Actually, there's a better place to actually get the details for those trains. Okay, so if we go into services, obviously we've got we can spawn walking, which means we can walk around any part of the route that is being placed in the game. But we have the 3 locomotives, and this is probably the best place to actually look at the locomotive details. So there you go. There's the old skipping ropes of the pipes going. So first up, we have the GP38-2. You can see her here. She's an Electromotive Division from 1972 to 1986. EMD 645-E, 16-cylinder, diesel electric locomotive. You've got her weight statistics, her horsepower, and her max tractive effort. I haven't driven her, I do not believe, or have I? Maybe I have. The problem is I'm not a huge train buff when it comes to these kind of things, so my knowledge on trains is pretty poor. So available services for this train, there are 9. Then we move on to the AC 4400CW, General Electric 1993 to 2004, 4-cylinder model, 7FDL16, diesel electric locomotive. Obviously a much heavier train, thusly has more horsepower and max tractive effort. There are 12 services available for this locomotive in-game from the start, so that's pretty cool. And finally, those pipes. The Locomotive SD40-2. General Motors 1972 to 1989. EMD 645-E3, 16-cylinder, diesel electric locomotive. This is kind of like the middle ground, weight, horsepower, and max tractive effort, as you can see. So you can skip between the various ones and compare the various levels. So the SD40 has 15 available services. So there, they are the 3 locomotives. They look very similar, but obviously they're all heavy haul, which is part of the of this game. Cool. Okay, so then we have scenarios. And in the scenarios, we have a number of scenarios which you can jump in and play. So we have Helping Hand, which is an hour. Clear Cut, which is 45 minutes. And you've got the levels here as well, difficulty levels. Fully Fueled, which is a 2-hour job. Cumberland Charge, beg your pardon, which is 2 hours. Ice and Snow, which is 3 hours. Powering America Part 1, which is 45 minutes. Powering America 2, 2 hours. And Cumberland Switchback, 30 minutes. Now, don't worry about these horrendous times. 3 hours. Who has time for 3 hours to sit down and do a route? I'm sure some people do, actually, some of the hardcore people, but most of us will be just jumping in and out of the game, and we don't have 3 hours. But it's okay, you can do bits and pieces, save it, jump out, and come back to it. It's not an all-in-one effort. And what's apparent by a lot of the stuff they're doing is they're trying to get this akin to the flight simulators of the world. So the FSX, the P3Ds, the X-planes, where the detail is there. So you start the aircraft up, for example, in cold and dark. You go through all the systems, power up all the the various systems that you require for takeoff. You go through the takeoff procedures, then you have your whole flying procedures, and then obviously a further set of landing procedures before you switch the plane off. They're going for the same level of immersion and detail as they are in Flight Sim, in Train Sim World. So you can start the locomotive up from cold and dark, go through the various processes, get her rolling. But not only that, there are different processes you need. You need to understand how the braking system works for when you're driving the train with empty carriages, or when you have full carts of coal, stretching them for miles. It all affects how you drive the locomotive. One of the cool things about this game, if we come back here, so if we select, say for example, the SD40, we can set the various, so we have summer clear, summer cloudy, summer fog, summer rain, some autumn mists, autumn drizzle, winter fog, winter blizzard, winter snow, winter clear, summer clear. And you just go around like that, or you can just fiddle around with these and change it as you want. So you can, the wetness obviously changes the metallic or the look of the reflections on the train to make it look wet, and also on the ground, on the rail. Snow level is just that. You can inch that however you want to do it. So it's very customizable. Cloud levels, you can adjust the clouds. Wind strength, go from a full-on gale, which doesn't look too bad, it's just a bit of wind in the trees, to a perfectly still day as the trees settle down. So there's plenty of customization in that part. If we skip on, now this is an interesting thing. This is the schedule for the day, and each train has one, or each locomotive type has one, and this is actually quite interesting. So this is what Dovetail Games call the Authentic Challenge. Experience a full day in the life with a brand new service mode which features recreation of 24-hour timetables based on real-world operations. No 2 days are the same. Hop on and off a range of services as they carry out their duties. Take control or ride along, the choice is yours. So basically for each train we have a schedule for the day. So we've got Wednesday the 14th of June up here, and it starts at 25 minutes past midnight, goes throughout the day till just gone 7 PM in the evening. Now what you can do, if you want to do some videos for example and you don't want to drive, you can just hop onto one of these trains and take a ride. You can just sit on the step there, sit in the chairs if you want, and just go along for the ride for a couple of hours or whatever it is. That's absolutely fine. You can do that for, I don't know, say up to here, then you can jump on, take control and drive the train there if you wanted to, then hand it back. It's very customizable, it's quite good. Or you could just hitch your train all the way to the end, or hitch the train to about anywhere along the system and hop off and then go do a bit of exploring. There's loads of things you can do, and I do like that freedom it presents. Whether or not that'll turn out to be just a kind of a selling point and a fad to begin with, and at the end of the day people are doing this to drive trains rather than just ride them. But it does open up the possibilities and the freedom to do other things and bring a little bit of creativity to it. So you could, jump off at one of these points waiting for another train and then get a nice cinematic as it comes along and record that. So there are various things you can do, which is pretty cool. Right, coming back to our profile for a minute. So we've had a look at the 3 locomotives, and we'll have a look now at Sandpatch Grade. This is the only route that ships with the game. So the Sandpatch Grade is the only one available, I'm afraid. But do not worry, there are quite a few things to do. As I said, we've already touched on the 24-hour real-life AI schedule where you can hop on, hop off, and have the freedom to do what you wish. But on this Sandpatch Grade, they do say, this is from Dovetail's website, you've been invited to work on the CSX Transportation as a railroad engineer, delivering important cargo on tight schedules, with 6 challenging scenarios and many places to explore, including Rockwood Mine, Sandpatch Summit, Cumberland Yard. Your skills, focus and endurance will be tested to the limit. So, although this is just one route, there are several key areas on the map which are of interest. So hopefully that will keep you entertained at least a little while until the next DLCs arrive. To keep you out and about and keep you occupied, there are collectibles. So at Sandpatch Grade, you have, I think these are the health and safety posters. There are 25 of those to collect. There are 25 hard hats in the area as well, and obviously on the route, should I say. We've also got these little stop signs, 25 of those, and 25 of these spades and poles, whatever they are. I haven't collected any, as you can see, because I only just started the game. So yeah, is there a good amount of content for your £25? Yes and no. Yes and no. We'll go out and do a drive, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that and how I feel that, yes, I understand where they're going, but it does feel a little bit limited compared to previous launch titles. The last thing we haven't looked at is tutorials, so we'll have a look at tutorials. As you can see, I've done a number of the tutorials. I've done the intro sequence, I've done the yard switching, and I've done the locomotive turntable. I have refueling to do. I have the AC 4400 CW introduction. I have the coal loading. I have train brakes theory. I have the SD42 introduction and the GP38 introduction. Each of those is 5 minutes long. And having done these three, there is something that is becoming apparent. What we'll do, let's do an introduction to the AC 4400, and I'll tell you through a couple of things which are a little bit lacking. So let's begin this, and then we'll start the discussion.
This locomotive is the AC 4400 CW, built by General Electric Transportation of Erie, Pennsylvania. This is the workhorse of the Sandpatch Grade, able to generate a staggering 4,400 horsepower from its motor.
That is pretty impressive. So this is how the tutorials work. You have a voiceover from this chap, and he basically talks you through the basics of what you need to do to complete the objectives in the... I've got control now.
Walk over to the locomotive as indicated.
Okay, will do. So, first thing to note, if I bring up the frame counter in the, well, almost the top right-hand corner, you can see the frames are struggling. So we're not quite hitting 30 looking in this direction. Oh, whoa. There was something ever so intensive there. We dropped down to 16 for a moment. We can get about 30 if we look towards the trees. Now, performance is a bit of an issue for the systems. I'll put a link to the system, my system specs down below. We've actually popped up to almost 40 frames a second now, so obviously there's been some loading going on in the background. We come over here. It's creeping up. It is creeping up. There's something going on anyway. Now I've got my performance monitor open as well, and I've got my CPU overclocked to 4.5 megahertz. Sorry, 4.5 gigahertz. And you know, I can see from the CPU core temperatures are absolutely fine. They're around about the, you know, the high 40s, low 40s degrees Celsius. CPU load on, I've got a 4 core, so I've got 18% on core 1, going up to 26%. Core 2 is 17 to about 24. Core 3 is 26 to 34%, and core 4 is 29 to 35% usage. So yeah, the max values is 52 for core 1, 44 for core 2, 50 for core 3 and 4. So that's not being particularly overworked for such poor, you know, for such poor frame rates. Looking at the GPU side, I can see the GPU clock is currently about half its maximum. The GPU core is currently running at 40%, and the GPU memory is at 20%. GPU memory controller is at 10%, and video game engine is currently at 0%, which is great. So there's a lot of optimization they can do to this game, so that's a bit disappointing. It doesn't feel like it's taken that step from the open beta that it should have. Alright, oh, is this the door here?
Open the cab door and proceed inside.
Oh, that's a bit sexy. I do like that. It does look a little bit like an indoor toilet. How do I close this door? There we go. So inside the frames are pretty good. Nice and smooth. Fuses and torpedoes. Nice! Now I think when they say torpedoes, are they the things they put on the track if their train breaks down behind them? So if another train comes up behind them, it goes over the torpedoes. They fire off a little puff and a bang, and it alerts the drivers that there's a broken down train up front. It's their equivalent of the breakdown triangle you have in the back of your car. I think. I could have made that up. We got Bill here, who's manning the phone. Everything okay, Bill?
To take control, you'll want the engineer's seat. Head over and sit down.
So we'll take the engineer's seat. Look, frame has now crashed, or they're now coming back, but I'm going to keep that up there for your
Let's get started by letting
information.
those around us know this locomotive is operational. Begin by turning the forward headlights control to bright.
Now this is a standard thing. Now you can zoom in and change that to bright. There we go. Objective complete. Lovely. You can just use the keys. There are short keys for everything, but I do like to
the reverser, brakes,
use the actual controls in the cab.
The reverser determines direction of travel. Put this into forward.
Put that into forward, yep.
The right-hand levers are the brakes. There are separate controls for the
So we have
entire train
auto
and
brake
for just the locomotive.
and independent brake.
Pull the independent brake lever all the way towards you.
What's that over there, Bill?
We're about to move, so make 2 blasts of the horn to alert anyone around. Remember, safety first.
Safety first, absolutely. It's not as satisfying as the other locomotive where you've got like a bar to pull. Far more interesting.
Add some power, but not too much. Too much power too soon can damage both the locomotive and the cars.
Okay.
Always start off nice and slowly. Pull the
So
throttle lever towards you by 1 notch.
Okay, so this is very much... I'm going to actually just use the key on that one. So this is very much similar to the opening tutorial you do. The wording's very similar as well. So we are away. We come to the external view. Yeah, we're getting 30 frames a second now, creeping up to, well, it's 30 frames a second.
You're moving. Great work. Push the throttle lever away from you to the middle center off or idle position.
I did that using the keys, just so we can stay in the external view.
That
So
concludes the basic engineer training on this locomotive. So
fantastic.
Let's bring it to a stop. Move the independent brake forward a short distance. As with applying power, too much
You
brake
can't actually
pressure
do
applies
anything.
too
Controls are
quickly.
locked out until the
Detrimental
actual
to the
chap
train
finishes
and
his
its cargo.
speech. There we go. And we'll slow that down into independent brake 33. That'll do. That'll slow us down nicely. One thing is disappointing, and it has been noted by others. The level of detail in these cabs is pretty good. So you've got the fuse boxes back here, which are all clickable. Well, actually, we're in a tutorial, so they're locked out at the moment. But normally, in a free play, these are all available to be clicked, switched on. You can switch the engine off, switch it back on, and you can do that full cold and dark if you use the aircraft or flight sim terminology.
As engineers, we're always learning and developing our skills.
But they don't go into that level of detail. You've got to try and figure that out for yourself. It'll be okay in a couple of months when people have put YouTube tutorials on there, but it's something... If the game's got that level of detail, why is it not showing it off with tutorials? People will want to know how to do the difficult stuff. You know, that's what people like in simulators. They like to be able to simulate everything, or as much as they can. But it is good that there's a kind of a balance point for those who don't want to go into that level, can just jump in, drive and jump out again. But it would be nice if the tutorials in game, which came with the starter package, do go into that level of detail. Also, kind of like there are tutorials for the brakes, as you saw earlier, but they don't go into the full experimental detail and how to drive like a mile long of carts filled with coal. It doesn't have that level of detail, which is, I feel it should do, because that's what it's aiming for. But there we go. We finished the AC 4400 CW introduction, Cumberland turntable. Miles driven, 191 yards. You can see the various stats. They track your stats all the way through, so that's all pretty good. So we have a number of tutorials, and I may do a couple more, but I'll probably bring you, for Monday, I'll probably bring you one of these scenarios, or maybe one of the free mode services, which we could potentially do. In the menu, we hit a steady 62 frames. Well, I was going to say steady 62 frames a second. What are my thoughts so far? This is obviously the first look at the real published game. We had a look at the beta, which was, obviously it's a beta, so you can't really judge it. There's a lot of work to do. Looking at the forums today, I see people are complaining that the performance is poor on some pretty good systems as well. And there's differing performance. You always get this with various things. You get people who are saying, you know, they've got an i5 laptop with a 1060 GTX graphics card with 16 gig of RAM, and they say they can play this on full ultra and it's smooth with 40 frames a second. And then you've got other people who have got i7, brand new i7 processors with 1080 graphics cards, 32 gigs of RAM, and it's chugging on ultra. So swings and roundabouts. It's one of these things. There's so many different system combinations, you can never be sure. But one thing I will show you. So you saw a little bit of the graphics that I'm running, and we were around about 30 frames a second, which was just about hanging in there. So I'm running in 1080 Windows full screen. Now I've tried this in just windowed, and I've also tried this in full screen. And windowed full screen seems to be the one that performs the best. So that's why we've gone back into that. Graphic preset we've got set to high. Anti-aliasing we've got to FXAA, and we've got VSync off because that causes a huge frame drop. In my advanced settings, you can see foliage is high, shadow is medium, effects are high, post-processing is ultra, view distance is medium, texture quality is high. And that's what I've discovered gives me a reasonable balance of performance, to say around about the 30 frames a second, which is manageable, I think. Now I was going to say, do I think the game is worth its money? Well,
about yard switching? Let's take a look.
I think it will be. Maybe not now. And one of the things I was going to touch on is that this is the building blocks of the next generation of train simming. So we've had the engine for Train Sim 2013, 15, 17, whatever, the different years, iterations of that thing, all been based under the same engine, which is almost, is it 10 years old, say? Probably not quite 10 years old.
Climb aboard
The
Locomotive and we'll get started.
engine they've built here is the one that they'll be using for the next 5 to 10 years. So what you've got to remember, yes, the hardware requirements at the moment are high, and it does require a lot more optimization. However, this is going to be the building blocks and the platform which is used for the upcoming years. So in 3 or 4 years' time, when we've got more and more DLCs and routes and locomotives added to this game, what now seem quite high specification will be a fairly low PC when it comes to specs. So I can kind of see why it's aimed so high, because it's got to have that longevity to it. It's obviously not helping people's mood at the moment, but that is the long-term goal. Now the price tag, £24, obviously whatever iterations it is in your own local currency. If you look at FSX or P3D or X-Plane, X-Plane's a bit of a weird one because there's loads of free content out there, so we'll put X-Plane to the side at the moment. If you look at the flight simulation as a standard, if you paid £30 for an aircraft, that's pretty cheap. You can look at PMDG stuff, that's around about the £100 mark for an aircraft, and they are hardcore study level sim, which this isn't quite. It's not quite got that kind of detail. So if you look back at more simplified ones, say quality wings, and they go for about £25–30, and you can say, well, yeah, that's kind of the level they're aiming at. So do I expect to see new locomotives coming out with the kind of the price tag of about £30–50? Yes, that's probably what's going to happen, because it's got that level of detail and that level of study simulation to it. That's not good news if you've got loads of scenarios like me on Train Sim 17. Obviously Train Sim 17 is not going anywhere. People will still be developing for that. One of the things that hasn't been released with this game, which is a real letdown, is there's no editor or scenario editor. So you can't create your own routes and scenarios at the present time. I'm sure that will come in a later iteration. Also, controller support isn't fully there, so if you've got a train driver, it's not currently working. I don't think Track IR is in game. I didn't even bother firing it up, to be honest with you, because it wasn't in the beta, and I've heard nothing more that it's been introduced. So I kind of feel it could have probably waited till Christmas with several more months worth of development, but I am imagining Dovetails require a little bit of injection of cash and investment to continue the project. I think it's a good foundation. It's not great. It's not great, but it's good. And with the coming work, which is no doubt underway already by Dovetail, hopefully they'll improve the performance and they'll bring some more content out fairly soon. We will probably have to pay for that, but a couple of freebie contents along the way would do a lot to appease some of the community. Anyway, so there are my initial thoughts on what I've seen so far on the Train Sim World release. I'll do some more, and as I say, on Monday I'll bring you a bit more of driving, because we've done a lot of talking, looking at systems and that kind of thing, but not actually too much in train driving around. So we'll do some more of that on Monday. So until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed my kind of ramblings on this, and I'll see you very soon.